I'm going to give you a couple of things that I think we know about this team heading into 2025. That would be the Commanders. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that I think we are unsure of at this point heading into 2025. Let's start with the positive. What do we know about this team? And I'm talking about, obvious things that, aren't really that debatable. We know that this team has a really good quarterback. We know that. They got a really good quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I also think we know that this team has a really good coaching staff, a really good head coach, elite level, who knows, but really good. Very good coordinator, certainly on the offensive side. And then when it comes to kind of the personnel, I think we certainly have a sense right now that offensive line is improved, that the O-line's got a chance to be an improved area of the team. They obviously traded for Laramie Tunsil, one of the best pass blocking left tackles in the game, one of the best all-around left tackles in the game, period. They drafted a guy that we've heard very good things about so far. Doesn't mean it'll hold up when the real games begin. But drafting Josh Connerly Jr. gives them a chance to open up the season with two totally different tackles. A left tackle in Tunsil, a right tackle in Connerly Jr. And by the way, a move of Brandon Coleman to left guard, taking over eventually when Cosme comes back for Nick Allegretti, who struggled at times last year, especially pass blocking wise. So I do think what we know about this team now entering this 6 weeks of quiet, 5 weeks of quiet before training camp begins and before we get into, the countdown to the first preseason game. Got a quarterback. We knew that. Have a coaching staff that's pretty solid. We've known that. The offensive line should be better. It should be not only better, it should be pretty good. It should be massively improved. They have an elite left tackle. They have a right tackle that they think has a chance to be really good. He's a rookie, so it may take time. And they've shifted around some things to maybe cover up a weakness in Allegretti that they may be moving on from, once 2025 is in the books. So I think we know that the O-line is improved and should be better. We also know that they are bigger on defense up front. I don't know how that manifests itself. We don't know the answer to that. But we do know that they made a conscious effort to go out and get bigger people on defense up front. Javon Kinlaw, Eddie Goldman, and then, combined with what they hope they have coming back in Deron Payne, who they spoke very highly of early in the minicamp in the OTA period. They wanted to get bigger because the bully in the division and the bully in the conference is massively big, and very physical up front, the Philadelphia Eagles. And by the way, they like to run the football with not just the best running back in the game, but they like to run it with their quarterback as well. And they do play and have resorted to bully ball at times against our team at various points during the 3 games that we played against Philadelphia last year. So one of the things we know is they made a conscious effort to get bigger on defense. And they did. They got bigger on defense up front. Lastly, things that we know is that they should be more talented at corner. This was something Ben mentioned, when he was on last week. He's like, look, just compare it to last year, guys like Mike Davis and Benjamin St-Juste, et cetera, right? They added, a guy in the second round of the draft in Trey Amos, who could have easily gone at some point in the first round. They added Jonathan Jones, a veteran corner. They brought back their best inside corner in Noah Igbenogany. They've got Sanders still coming back, and of course, I think the big wild card here is Marshawn Lattimore, but they, certainly have high hopes that trade will end up working out, and that Lattimore, with a full offseason to get healthy, to get more acclimated to a new system, should provide them with Marshawn Lattimore level play. Look, Sanders still and and Noah I and Lattimore were here already. But adding Jonathan Jones and Trey Amos, and the early returns on Amos are, no one said they felt like they blew it. It's hard to tell. They just look better at corner on paper. That's what I would say we've learned. We've learned that they're probably better equipped to cover people this year with the corners they have on the roster versus the corners they had on their roster last year. So, what do we think we know heading into 2025? I think we know that they've got a top five-ish kind of a quarterback. They have a really good coaching staff, that the offensive line is improved and should be better. In fact, I think of the new things, that's what I would feel most confident about, that they made a conscious effort to get bigger on defense. They got bigger on defense. How that plays out in terms of production, time will tell, but they did get bigger up front on defense. And corner is a position that looks a lot better right now than it did a year ago. What are the things that we still don't know? Look, I'm not even going to partake in the conversation of we don't know if Jaden will suffer a sophomore slump season. I mean, maybe he will. Maybe he won't. I don't think he will. I think the odds, putting that onto a list of things that we don't know at this point, is really reaching. There are other things that are more obvious that we don't know. And it starts with big picture. We don't know if they've improved themselves defensively. We know that they need to improve defensively from where they were last year, but we don't know right now whether or not this will be an improved defense. I just said that they got bigger defensively, but we don't know that it manifests itself into better point of attack, better at taking on double teams, better at handling gaps, better at stopping runs, stopping the run, better at handling the run on the edges. We're talking about C gap and outside of that where they really got hurt last year. We don't know if they're better on defense overall. Specifically, we don't know if they've improved themselves as a run defense team. And there's so much that goes into that. So much that we don't even understand. Like the nuanced variability of defense year to year. There's no real obvious explanation for why a defense can be horrible one year and then the next year be massively improved without a lot of personnel changes. It happens. Without a coaching change, it happens. Defense is so much more variable year to year than offense. Bringing these guys back for year two in the same system may be the difference between being horrible, which they were last year, and being adequate, being average. If they had had an average run defense last year, may have made a difference. I mean, again, it's interesting the way the season played out. It's like, oh my God, they got run on again, but they won. They got run on again, but they won again. Well, we know how that was happening. That was happening with an offense and a quarterback that just would not let them lose, and they kept winning games. But ultimately, when you got to the game to get to the Super Bowl, on the first play from scrimmage, Saquon Barkley was off to the races 60 yards for a touchdown. And Philadelphia could have named their point total and yardage total in that game. They had 55 and close to 500 yards. They could have certainly, if they had needed it, gotten a lot more. Will Washington's offense end up being its best defense in 2025? That would be problematic, at least on paper heading into the year, because of the teams that they're playing and the quarterbacks they're playing and the opposing offenses that they will face. You've got Jordan Love in week 2. You have Justin Herbert in week 5. You got Patrick Mahomes in week 8. You've got Jared Goff and the Lions in week 10. And the list keeps going on and on. You've got a different setup this year. It could play out that they get good fortune and they catch teams at the right time and they catch teams that are down a few key players when they end up playing them. But what we don't know at this point, regardless of OTA days, minicamp days, a draft, free agency, we don't know if they got better on defense. I think they got bigger on defense. I think their corners, certainly on paper, look better on defense, but we don't know if they got better on defense. We don't know if this will be a better defensive team. By the way, it's very possible that they could end up being a better defensive team next year, but give up more or give up the same because of the competition level they're playing. Last year's best defense was their offense, the possession of the football, the not punting, the not turning it over, the scoring on most possessions. I mean, there was that stretch where they didn't punt for like 2.5 games, and they scored on almost every possession. Their fourth down percentage is staying super high, keeping possession of the ball. But to win the whole thing, I think we all feel, I do, like it's hard to overcome what they had last year to win another 12 in the regular season and then win 3 in the postseason to get there. Specifically, run defense, and we certainly don't know if they're any better as a pass rush team. In fact, you could make the argument that they'll be a lesser pass rush team. By the way, I'm assuming that you guys saw some of the news from over the weekend in Cincinnati. Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals are starting to talk. Hendrickson's going to end up a Bengal, more likely than not, I would think. What else don't we know? Defense as a whole, specifically run defense, and by the way, the ability to rush the passer. We don't know if they got more dynamic offensively. We wanted more speed. We wanted more playmaking ability. We think that they got more dynamic by the addition of Deebo Samuel, but we can't be entirely sure because the last time we saw Deebo Samuel, he was not available, and when he wasn't 100%. And look, the team around him had something to do with that. But one of the things we went into this offseason thinking they needed was another big-time playmaker to add an even more dynamic element to what has already become, under Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, et cetera, a dynamic offense. I don't know that for sure. I feel like Deebo in a contract year is going to be a major addition and is going to add another dynamic element, but we can't be sure of it. Lastly, even though they went out there and they signed a kicker that at times has been a decent kicker in Matt Gay, we don't know that the kicking situation for sure is going to be any better than it's been, because Matt Gay, remember, last year ended up in Indianapolis, missing 6 kicks of 50 or more yards on the season. He was very ineffective from long distance. So we'll see. They certainly wanted more stability at kicker. We had the whole situation of multiple kickers last year. They wanted stability. We'll see if they got it in Matt Gay. We don't know for sure.